Welcome to the Social Solutions Project, using project based learning to promote social awareness. I'm Dottie,
And I'm Renee.
and we're going to talk a little bit about project based learning and a particular project that we do together at Steinert High School called the Social Solutions Project. So, just a little bit about us. I am an 11th and 12th grade English teacher, and I've been teaching in Hamilton for the last 20 years. And I am a wife and mom of a couple of grown kids and some fur babies. And I've been doing this project with Renee now for 7 years. Renee?
Hi, I'm Renee. I'm a high school librarian. As Daddy said, we've been doing this together for 7 years. It's kind of hard to believe that it's been 7 years.
Really hard to
Um,
believe.
yeah. Librarianship is a second career for me. My background is a science background, so it's really cool for me working in project-based learning, getting to see some of the science topics that students do instead of just some of the things in the humanities that they come to seek out in the library. On social media, you can find me. I'm Overdue Librarian as my professional and personal account, or Spartans Library to find out everything that's going on in school.
Awesome. And so, with that, we're going to talk to you a little bit about project based learning in general. So, project based learning is a teaching method in which students learn by actively engaging in real world and personally meaningful projects. So, the way that works is that students are given choice in what they choose to address in the problem they choose to solve or however you decide to frame it. The experience provides opportunities for students to figure out what's important to them, and also teaches them a lot of real world skills that they can translate into other disciplines, into possible potential career fields. It gives them a lot of opportunity to sort of figure out what's important to them and how they can contribute to society or make a difference or find a way to really be involved in community.
I think that's what sets it aside from quote unquote doing a project versus project based learning. Because in project based learning, it's all student driven. The choice in what they're researching, what they're creating, and how they're going to present it to the world.
And what's really great about it, in addition to all of that, you can make it fit almost any academic subject, almost any grade level. You can make it group, you can make it single. It has a lot of flexibility in how students express themselves, how they learn, and the skills that they cultivate doing these projects. Particularly, the project we do is called the Social Solutions Project. What that is a project that allows students to choose topics that are important to them, that they see as a problem in society, something that needs to be addressed. It could be science based, it could be community based, it could be environmentally based, socially based, but some type of project. They choose this problem in society that is meaningful or important to them. They research the problem, because I am an English teacher and Renee is a librarian and we work together on this, there's a heavy emphasis on the research and they have to actually produce a fairly lengthy research project. But that's not necessarily a requirement. They should, however, have to do some research. And researching the problem helps them understand what all the moving parts are that cause this problem, how it is currently being addressed, how it can possibly be addressed in the future. They get to determine a way to address or solve the problem that is reasonable, doable, replicable, and they get to design the solution. So it's really all about the process for them. The way our project works is at the end, they have a fair and they introduce their projects to the community. So first we have Bree. Do you want to talk about Bree?
Sure, I'd love to talk about Bree. Um, Bree was in your class a couple years ago. She worked with us, and at that time, a lot of schools were losing their funding and cutting things like their music programs and electives. So Bree took that on as her topic, did her research, and designed a program, a community-based program, which would bring music instruction into schools. as an elective for students, or it might have been as a club.
And then we have Hannah.
The topic she researched was anxiety and depression in teens, and that seems to be a popular topic
Every
on
year. That
students
is
doing this.
definitely one of our most popular topics every year.
Hannah's solution was unique, and this was a couple years ago, so I don't know that anything like this existed on the market then, but I believe it does now.
Yes, thanks
Um,
to the pandemic. I'm sure it does.
yeah, she designed an app where teens could talk to each other, and there would be also an element where they could be connected with a professional for counseling, and it wouldn't monitor all of their conversations, but I think that there were some keywords that would maybe the app would then suggest, hey, do you want to talk to someone, and then connect the student to the resources that they would need.
Awesome. We also had Jessica, and Jessica, I believe she had a family member who was diabetic, who was type 1 diabetic and required a pump. And she wanted to design some sort of app system that would connect with the pump to constantly inform the wearer of the pump of the finer details of how their blood sugar is, and when suggest possible meals or exercises to lower blood sugar. And it was a really interesting concept. I think today that there are now some apps, but at that time, there wasn't really anything that would connect directly to the pump that would be on your smartphone. So that was a really cool project that was inspired by somebody she knew who had to wear a pump, an insulin pump, and didn't have that kind of constant communication, had to keep checking. So I thought that was a really great project. Our next student is Parker, and Parker decided to take on the problem of urban deserts. And urban deserts, food deserts, are actually places where you have all city and no garden. It is really hard for people who live in inner cities to be able to have access to and afford fresh produce, things that are healthy for them to eat. And so he designed these small hydroponic gardens that could be done in empty buildings or could be done in apartments on different levels, so that people could either grow their own produce, or if there's a community garden, have access to that produce locally for a very inexpensive price that was easy to cultivate. And so his display was great because he actually grew hydroponic lettuce and brought it for the Social Solutions Fair, which is actually really cool. So, what we're going to talk about next is a little bit about how to design a PBL. These are basically 5 things to keep in mind when you're putting together a PBL experience.
All right, so the first one, provide context and let the students choose. So students learn better when they get to choose what they're learning about and when they have a connection with the material. So the context that we provide to them is, we're looking for issues and problems in society that we can make a difference on the individual level. So that's the context that we give them. We give them, I think you give them guidelines, right, Dottie, in class
Yes.
about what appropriate topics are and what kind of might be a little bit not, is not going to fit.
The only 2 really deal breakers for me are anything that you would have to, the only way you can fix it is if you have to pass a law. And the other thing is anything that is strictly a political, philosophical, or religious debate. For example, gay rights or gay marriage or abortion. Those things are legislated based on belief systems. So they're not really problems. They're arguing points. So we try to take those out. But outside of that, Renee, I think they've covered everything under the sun, from small local issues like curriculum problems to large global issues like cleaning up the oceans. I think we've seen pretty much
Oh, yeah.
almost everything.
Yeah. And my favorite ones are always the ones that are personal to them based on
Yes.
something in their family or something in their life that they want to change, and seeing them have that starting to gain power over that,
Mm-hmm.
I think is always a great thing to see in the students. And
Right.
let the students determine what's important to them, and they might not know starting out. So it's a lot of fun brainstorming with them and seeing them grasp, doing some of that initial research and figuring out how they're going to narrow it down and define that problem that they want to tackle.
And I think in most cases, most of them really don't have any clue until they start looking at things or we start doing that brainstorming process. Some of them do. Some of them are like, oh, yes, I'm doing this right now.
Mhm.
But a lot of them, they don't know until they start the process. And I think that's the cool part is watching that evolve. The second thing that's super important is to create and communicate the structure. It's super, super important to give kids structure. It doesn't matter what the age is. They need it. They may not know they need it. They may not acknowledge they need it, but we know that they do.
They need it.
They absolutely need it. And this is a life skill for them. So when they're working on this project, one of the things that they develop is these skills to manage it. You know, you're talking about time management, content management, um, workload management. And so that is a really big piece of creating this type of project. So if you don't give them clear parameters and don't give them a structure or framework to work within, they're going to flounder a little bit. And that's okay if they flounder a little, but you don't want them to do that for too long.
They're coming up and, something is challenging. You want them to have that resilience to move forward, but you also want there to be a structure there that they can move forward within. And also the check-in points so that they know, that we're there to support them. And we're monitoring their progress kind of throughout the process.
Yeah, check-in points are super important. Keeping the instructions as clear as possible, taking the time to review them in class, and don't be afraid to ask them for their input on timelines. I mean, there's been plenty of
Mhm.
times when I'll introduce the project. Here are the parameters. Here's the basic instructions. Their first reaction is, "You mean I can choose? I don't know what to do with that." But then the second
Right?
one, but then the second one is, "Well, how much time do I have?" So one of the things I've started doing the last few years, certainly, is after I lay it all out for them, I pull up a calendar and say, okay, the final date is this. How do we want to work this time in between? What kind of time do you think you're going to need? And of course, it's flexible. We revisit that schedule and we reallocate time as necessary. Sometimes formative assessment is just a checkpoint. It's just we're going to have conferences this week. I just want to sit with you for 2 minutes and you show me where you are. It doesn't have to always be graded. Most formative really shouldn't be graded. It should be these checkpoints, these communication access points to help push the process along. And it's equally important to, again, clearly communicate your expectations. What is it that you are expecting them to accomplish?
Absolutely.
So, examples and instruction. For this project, the way we do it, the first half is dedicated to crafting a full research paper on the actual problem. And then using resources like Noodle Tools, which is Renee's area of expertise, and I'll let her talk about that. But using those, we help them sort of um, figure out how to complete this process. But why don't you tell them a little bit about Noodle Tools?
Sure. So Noodle Tools is a suite of tools available online by subscription. But there are other things like
Mm.
Zotero that I think you can get without subscription to do it. But it gives the students a framework for their research. There's an element where they are collecting their sources and making sure they gather the information from those sources that they need not only to cite it, but also like, why am I using this source and how is it going to help me define my problem? So we go over note taking, we go over source evaluation, and depending on where the students are, we can spend more or less time with that, depending on their experience with it. It also within Noodle Tools, it helps them with their creating an outline and taking notes and making sure those notes are linked back to the source and how everything is going to fit together to build their argument. We do spend some time with some classes in the beginning on just how to formulate an effective Google search and how to evaluate the results from a Google search, how to evaluate websites, how to find that vocabulary or those search terms that are going to get you academic sources, both online and then in the databases when we move into the EBSCO databases, so they can find actual academic research and scientific research on their topics.
And then once they have all that, often it's important to show them what to do with it. And so
Right,
there are times when one of us or both of us will give them examples of, okay, if I'm writing about this and this is my source information, how would I synthesize this into a thesis statement, an introductory paragraph? How do I pull this source in and tie it in? How do I find the information I need? And so often we'll crowdsource topics, their topics, and give them ideas as to, okay, if you were going to do this topic, let's say you're doing the homeless veteran population. All right. Well, what is that population? What does it look like? What are the demographics? How do I find that? And so we'll work through a problem with them to show them how to do it. We often assume because kids spend a lot of time on technology that they really know how to
right.
use it. But what we've learned is they don't.
Not necessarily, no.
They know how to play games. They can Fortnite to your heart's content, but they can't change the margins in Word or Docs. So this is where giving examples, showing them how to do things, and giving instruction in small batches on
Right,
particular skills helps them to build that. And really, something we've worked hard to do is normalizing asking questions. They don't like to ask questions. No one likes to feel like I'm stupid because I'm asking this question or nobody else needs to know this. Chances are everybody else wants to know it, but they don't want to ask it either. So we try to normalize question. It has to be part of the culture. Number 4 is time. Yeah, that's a tough one, huh? This particular project, like I said, the first half is the research paper. So I break it up by semester. This is a project that my students work on all year. So we spend the first half a year, a lot of it with Renee in the library, working on that research, those hardcore research skills, putting together a really thorough, well done, fairly lengthy research project. And then the second half of the year, we work on solving it. That's certainly by far the most fun part of it. But carving out the time is super important. They need time to find resources. They need time to ask questions. They need time to collaborate with their peers, which is an element we've added in the last couple of years. They need time to conference and they need scheduled class time. It would be great if they could all just do this on their own, but they can't. They don't know how. That's why you're teaching them. It's really, really important to schedule in class time just for them to work. And then you can circulate, you can talk to them individually, you can be there when they need help. And I think that's probably one of the most important things when we talk about time in this project experience. Renee, don't you think so?
Oh, absolutely. And so, like, I'm looking ahead to when we might be in a remote or a hybrid situation. And I'm picturing, we can do that chunk of instruction as a mini lesson in the beginning. And then maybe a group will break out with you and a group will break out with me. So we can talk about, what are their topics and what are the keywords that they're finding or what are their sticking points right now. I think we're going to wind up doing a lot of that as small groups and maybe even some one-on-ones as we move into remote or hybrid
I
models of
agree,
it.
and I think organizing them into the small groups for this project, this will be our first time doing it remotely and in a hybrid situation. And I think those small think tank groups are really going to be important for them to provide feedback to each other and to peer review things and to really, ask questions to each other and then maybe come to a consensus. And if they can't answer it, then they can ask us as well. And then we'll be able to help them a little bit more effectively.
Right. I mean, even when we were doing it in person, and trying to get everyone to come into the library and talk to the librarian in the beginning is a little intimidating for some of them. But once we started crowdsourcing some of their ideas for topics or some of their ideas for the keywords and working together as a group to narrow it down, it really broke down some of those barriers. And the students became more comfortable with me and with the project and with really digging in to some of that inquiry-based learning.
Absolutely. And that really ties into number 5, which is feedback and support. And of all
Mhm.
of these, this may be the most important one. It's important that as a teacher, you understand how important your feedback is and your support is. And it's not just proofreading their work and saying, no, fix this, fix this, fix this, which we do. That I'm not saying we don't, but it's questioning. It's, I see you've chosen to do this. I see you're looking at how to solve this problem. What uh how did you come to this conclusion? Or what if you look at it like this? Or just kind of turning their head a little bit to look at other options and then letting them decide which way that they want to go. But without that
Right,
feedback and that support, and the support part of that, and I think that's feedback is one thing. And as teachers, we give feedback. That's what we do, right? But support's a
right,
little different. Support is kind of like, I'm stuck and I don't know where to go. And it's that piece of taking the time to sit down and talk it out with them so that they can work themselves out of that corner, if
right.
that makes sense,
Yeah, let
right?
them sit with that discomfort a little bit, and try and get out of them, the solution. You're not giving it to them. You're not answering that question for them, but you may be asking some questions that lead them to come to their own conclusions, their own decisions of which way they want to go with it.
Right. But if you have them in these little think tank groups and you start working with the group and saying, okay, this is one way maybe you could support each other, and give each time they meet, give them a question to kind of get them talking and thinking. And then they start to, this amazing thing happens. They start to support each other and they start to say, that's a really good idea. Have you thought about this? And then you get to watch this happen. It's like magic.
Yeah. As the trust builds within those groups and the students really start trusting each other, they're open up more. And now we're no longer afraid of asking questions in front of each other. And everyone
Absolutely.
moves forward.
That brings us to collaboration. Collaboration creates more resources for students. So the teacher provides context, provides criteria, and sets the expectations of the PBL.
And as the librarian, I provide information, literacy instruction, and more support to help them achieve the goals of the PBL.
And then this amazing thing happens. Students have access to more and varied resources. They have greater availability of support, and they also have perhaps the most important thing, which is a model of effective collaboration for students. They see the trust and respect professionally that we share with each other, and the shared power and risk. When they see that collaboration between us, and how I'm not afraid to ask Renee a question and Renee's not afraid to ask me a question, and we work together, it provides a model for them of what collaboration looks like, because they don't really, I think, innately know how to collaborate with each other in
Right.
groups. They need to see it.
Absolutely. And as we build the trust with them, and they start working in their think tanks, they also build that trust with each other because they've seen how it works and they've seen it in action.
I have also added to, or we have added to our slideshow, a sample unit plan. So this is what the unit looks like. It's set up with the New Jersey student learning standards for career readiness, life literacies, and key skills, which we just found out were just updated for 2020. It has
They
with
are.
it understandings, it has essential questions. We're not going to take the time to go through all this. It does give you a step-by-step learning plan, as well as a pacing guide. If you were to do this, you can make it longer, make it smaller, but we thought it was important for you to see what it could look like all sort of written out. So feel free to make a copy of it and use anything that you think would work for you. Since we already brought them up, the New Jersey Career Readiness, Life Literacy, and Key Skill, our particular PBL, the Social Solutions Project, is more than just a PBL experience. It addresses almost every single one of these standards. So we're not going to read through all of them. They're here for you. We have listed them all in our description below the video. So we thought it would be really cool to give you some examples of other types of PBL experiences that you could use in different classes and different subjects. Some of the things we came up with: create an interactive textbook for a course or unit. I just think that sounds really fun.
I love that one. Create a DIY YouTube channel with videos that explain how-tos for students. I think that's the one we should try next.
I definitely think we should try that one this year, especially now that we're remote for a while. Design a
Right?
nonprofit company and create a marketing campaign. Marketing's always fun.
Use examples of major world civilizations to design the perfect society.
So, for all you teachers out there doing dystopian novels, there you go. There's a project for you. Redesign the school. It could be the school day, the schedule, the building, curriculum to reflect what students need.
Create a podcast channel with multiple episodes that cover topics related to an area of study or an area of student inquiry. They could choose their own topics.
So at the end here, we have a whole bunch of recommended resources for you. All of these will be linked in the description under our video. We also included a couple of videos on creating interactive notebooks. This is something I'm going to incorporate this year with the project so that they have a place to put all these details and answer journal questions and things like that. And I can access them without having to see them all the time.
I love the idea of the interactive notebooks because I think this year the students were keeping a notebook
They were.
um, as
Hmm.
we went through with all of their notes and looking at some of the interactive notebooks, I could see how it's going to be much more powerful.
And then in the end, we wanted to share this really awesome infographic with you, courtesy of Science Lessons That Rock. We do a lot of projects. And so you want to make sure if you're looking to do a PBL, project based learning experience, versus a traditional project, there are some differences. And so this little checklist helps you to sort of tweak that project into a PBL experience. Do you want to talk about our buddy John Spencer?
Oh, yeah, I just discovered his videos as I was looking for materials to include here. And he does a really nice job of explaining what is project-based learning. I think that's one of his videos. And this one, what happens when students engage in project-based learning. And I'll tell you, it's a little, inspirational video, but we have seen what happens when students engage in project-based learning, and students have come back and thanked us for doing this actually, which how
They
many times in
do.
your career do students actually do that? So, it's really rewarding for the students.
It's
It's,
nice
a
to
blast for us.
It's oh my gosh, it's so much fun. It sounds like so much work, and trust me, it is. And, they don't like research. They do it because they have to. They have way more fun on the project plan part of it at the end. But it's so amazing to see them develop something or pursue something that's important to them. And that
Right.
really is the takeaway with project-based learning, is to allow kids to find things that they can be passionate about. And I know that we've had students that were kind of thinking, well, I'm going to go to college and do this. And then after they have done the project, have completely changed the trajectory of where they were going to go. And,
Absolutely.
we've had students come back and say, because I did that project, I really decided I'm going to be a lawyer. Or I'm going to get involved in
Social
but
justice.
social justice. Thank you.
Yep.
And actually, several of them have, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and then some of the students doing the science-based projects or things built around education have wound up going into those careers. It really, it's interesting because, we have juniors doing this project, and it's right when they are thinking about what are they going to do? Are they going into a career? Are they going into the military? Are they going into college? And why? What are they going to study? What do they want to do? And this really gives them a great opportunity at that point where we do the project to explore, right,
Yes.
without that huge
Hmm.
commitment. before they make that huge commitment, they can explore areas of interest.
So that's it. And that is project based learning in a nutshell. That is how we use it with the Social Solutions Project. Hopefully, you have found some of this helpful. We are certainly happy to help anyone or to explore topics and possibilities. Please feel free to reach out to us, and
Absolutely.
best of luck this year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
It always is.
Thank you.